This is part 2 of my little Retrowave tutorial. Welcome back to the channel. In part 1 we've seen how to animate the text, and if you haven't seen that tutorial yet, go and check it out in here. In the second part we're going to create the background. Let's dive in. We're going to create a new composition. I'm going to make it 1920 by 1920 because we want to work on a square. And then very simply, all we have to do is to create some basic shapes. So I'm going to create a line, I'm going to get rid of the fill, and I'm going to increase the stroke until we get something nice and thick. In our shape properties, we want to go and find a trim path. This is how we're going to animate our line going across the screen. So for example, if you move the end point or the start point, you can see what we get. Let's start by keyframing both the start and the end. In the first frame, we want to bring the start up to 100, and then 2 seconds later, we want to bring it down back to 0. Then at 1 second, we want to keyframe our end property, and at 3 frames, bring it down to 100. And this is what we get. Now it's just a matter of playing with offsetting our keyframe until we get what we like. So I'm settling for something like this. So we got this line going past. Let's ease in for good measure, and this is what we get. Now I would like everything to be much faster. So what I'm going to do is select all the layers, hold Alt on the keyboard, and just move it across. By holding Alt, you're keeping the ratio or the distance between the keyframe the same. This is what we get now. All we have to do now is to duplicate our first shape, move it across, duplicate it again, move it across, and keep doing that until we fill the screen. This is our result so far. What I want to do now is to offset some of the keyframes so they're not all coming in at the same time. We're gonna do this, then we're gonna move this in there and make it as random as you like. And this is our new effect. And this basically is the gist of it. Let's start creating our background. So we take our original comp, our source comp, we drag it into a new composition, can now call it PG for background 01, and we can change the properties of this composition to 1920 by 1080 because we are working in a 16:9 ratio. All we have to do now is to manipulate this comp until we get something that we are happy with. For example, in my previous test, one that works really nice is to add an effect called CC Sphere. This will create a perfect sphere, and this is what you get. I've added a solid as a background before we start to add our effects to create a synthwave loop to our composition. We then go ahead and create an adjustment layer, and we start to add a VR glow and play with the luma threshold. Then in the original composition we can add a gradient ramp, and if we change the position of the handles like we did in the previous one, the color that we're gonna input are gonna affect our layers accordingly. I'm gonna keep the color as similar as it was. This is what we got now. Another neat effect that you can add on this is called CC Light Sweep, and it creates some accents of color depending on the position. So you can play with how strong you want the sweep to happen, and what I tend to do is add 2 iterations of it and move one towards the top and one towards the bottom. Now it's just a matter of adding a couple of extra effects, like exactly like what we did in the previous tutorial, which are CC wide time, again by setting to 3. He repeats the frame that he just seen, and he also goes backwards, so he anticipated the 2 frames that he's about to see, and this is our effect. To complete the effect, all we want to do is to add the animated paper that we created in the previous one with another adjustment layer, add the posterized time effect set to 12, which is only gonna show us every other frame. It's like a technique that we normally call on twos. Now make our composition slightly longer, say 6 seconds. We bring in our original text that we created in the previous tutorial. This is what we get. Now, the same way as we apply the CC Sphere effect, we can create loads of different effects. So let's hide our title, let's go into CC Sphere, take it off so we go back to the original animation, which as you can see, it already looks cool. But obviously there's many more ways that we can use the same asset to create different options. For example, a good one is to use a Bezier warp. The best way to use the Bezier warp is to activate proportional grid. And what you want to do is grab those handles and move them like that, and then grab those one and move them like that to create this kind of fall off that looks like it's going into the distance. For a better result, you want to increase the quality soon to maybe 16. Another cool effect that we can add is the CC cylinder. It turns everything into a cylindrical type of shape and it gives you this rise up type of effect. CC cylinder is a 3D effect, so you can position it, turn it and move it however you want. You can even go as far as creating a little tunnel effect from the same asset. So this is a good way to see how just a simple composition can make you go a long way. Another trick that you can use to create this synthwave effect is to add another effect called Venetian blind. If you set the direction to 90 and you switch the transition to around 25%, you get these extra lines for free. And this really enhance and create the old gamey, synthwavy or retrowavy effect. It's a very interesting technique, and with just one simple basic composition we've managed to create loads of different backgrounds. This technique obviously applies to loads of other things, so I hope you learned something new today. If you've liked this little series, please leave a like or a comment. I'm always happy to answer your question, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!